Have you ever stopped to think about the tangled web of relationships that often fuel great art? Like, what if a really deep friendship, a passionate artistic muse, and, well, a surprisingly supportive marriage all happened within the same influential family? And what if that shaped an entire art movement?
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating corner of Impressionist art history. It's a story that weaves together the lives, the loves, the artistic journeys of three key figures, Berthe Morisot and the brothers Édouard and Eugène Manet. We've got some really compelling source material here, stuff that paints this vivid picture of what they call this intriguing triangle. So our mission is basically to pull out the most important bits of knowledge from this rich story, give you a shortcut to understanding not just their art, but the personal stuff, the dynamics that shaped it all. Maybe a few surprising facts along the way.
That's exactly right. And what's so fascinating here is how these personal connections, these relationships, they weren't just happening alongside Impressionism. They really profoundly influenced its birth, its evolution. So we'll trace their individual stories, look at the controversies swirling around them, and maybe most importantly, try to understand how one woman, Berthe Morisot, navigated this, completely male-dominated art world.
Yes.
It found love and also secured huge artistic support. It really makes you ask, doesn't it? How much does an artist's personal life actually shape their public legacy?
It absolutely does. And that question, I think we'll see it play out really vividly here. To really get it, though, we have to start at the beginning. Because the seeds of their artistic rebellion, they were actually sown in pretty conventional homes, privileged Parisian households even. Let's start with Édouard Manet, born 1832. His family, wealthy bourgeoisie. Father, a top judge. Mother, daughter of a diplomat. You get the picture. His parents, especially his dad, they had big plans for him, law, maybe diplomacy. But Édouard, apparently from a really young age, was just, quote, fascinated by painting. You could almost imagine those family dinners, right? The tension. He basically refused, or maybe failed, every conventional path they threw at him. Until finally, his father, probably sighing heavily, accepted the art thing. Okay, now fast forward just a bit. Berthe Morisot, born 1841, her background, just as privileged really. Her father was a top government official. And get this, her mother was the great niece of the famous Rococo painter, Jean-André Fragonard. Yeah. So Berthe and her sister, Edma, they got art lessons at home. Pretty standard for their class back then. It was actually a tutor, Joseph Guichard, who took them to the Louvre, where painters could copy the masters.
Yeah.
That connection to art was there from the start.
And if you look at the bigger picture here, both Édouard and Berthe, they came from these worlds where art was, it was encouraged as a kind of refined hobby, but definitely not as a serious profession for people of their standing. And Édouard's younger brother, Eugène, born just a year after Édouard in 1833, he had a similar path, trained as a lawyer, served in the army. But in the end, he decided to follow his older brother into art. Though he never really hit that same level of fame. But this shared experience, this sort of defiance against expectations, choosing art in some way, it created a unique foundation for how they'd later interact. It set a tone, didn't it?
It really did. But okay, before Berthe really becomes central to Édouard's artistic and maybe personal life, there's this other layer. A fascinating, almost scandalous bit about Édouard's own life we need to touch on. It involves his wife, Suzanne Leenhoff. Édouard married Suzanne, who'd been his piano tutor. She was about 3 years older. Seemed simple enough. But it wasn't. Right? Because when they got married, Suzanne already had a son, a 10-year-old boy named Léon Édouard Coella. And here's where it gets kind of wild. Our sources mention this persistent rumor. Some historians think Léon was actually Édouard's stepbrother, like the son of Édouard's own father and Suzanne.
Which is quite something.
Yeah. Others guess maybe he was Édouard's own son from like a secret 10-year affair before they got married. The birth certificate named some guy named Coella as the father. But nobody knows who Coella was. And Suzanne wasn't married when Léon was born. So lots of mystery there.
And what's really striking, truly, is that Édouard Manet never publicly said who Léon Édouard's father was, ever. He could have just cleared it all up, right? Put the rumors to rest. But he chose silence. Now, you combine that silence with the fact that Édouard died in 1883 from locomotor ataxia, which is a known side effect of syphilis, often sexually transmitted, though it paints a picture of a pretty complex private life. Maybe a very secretive one. It definitely adds this layer of intrigue, behind the charming, outgoing public image he had. It suggests he was maybe carefully managing that boundary.
So the silence wasn't just about privacy, maybe. It was about image control.
Could be. Or protecting the family name, perhaps. In that society, appearances were crucial, especially for someone of his social standing. Acknowledging an illegitimate child, or worse, the scenario involving his father, That would have been absolutely devastating socially. So his choice to stay silent, it speaks volumes about the pressures, maybe even the hypocrisies of 19th century Paris.
Okay, so despite all that complexity, that mystery in his personal life, the sources are really clear. Édouard and Berthe shared this deep, undeniable connection. We found this really moving quote from Berthe. She was writing to her sister Edma after Édouard died, and it was an agonizing death. She wrote, "These last days were very painful. Poor Édouard suffered atrociously. If you add to these almost physical emotions my old bond of friendship with Édouard, an entire past of youth and work suddenly ending, you will know that I am devastated." I mean, that's not just polite sympathy, is it? That's real grief.
Not at all. It points to a connection that went way beyond just being acquaintances. It speaks of a shared history, youth, artistic struggle. Her devastation, it suggests she lost not just a friend, but a really profound artistic partner, someone vital to her own creative life.
And their paths really crossed in 1868. Fittingly, it was at the Louvre. Amidst all those masterpieces they both loved. That's where Édouard Manet met Berthe Morisot. She was single, and of course, as was the custom then, heavily chaperoned. But still, this lasting friendship, based on mutual artistic fascination, it just blossomed pretty quickly. Édouard was definitely, quote, quite intrigued by her. And that intrigue, well, it turned into powerful artistic inspiration almost immediately. He painted her, get this, 12 times.
12.
Yeah. More than anyone else, more than any other subject, more than his own wife, Suzanne. Berthe really truly became his muse. Can you just imagine the intensity? Her sitting there, him painting, maybe her mother chaperoning in the corner, watching closely.
Oh, absolutely. And the societal side of this for Berthe, well, it was huge. She's an unmarried woman being painted over and over by this known artistic rebel, Édouard. I mean, this is the guy who painted Luncheon on the Grass, Olympia. Scandalous stuff back then. Her parents were, as the sources say, probably very concerned about their daughter's reputation, and you can understand why. A woman's standing was everything. Her mother even made that sharp comment after Édouard finally painted his wife, Suzanne, something like, "He has made a portrait of his wife. I think it was about time." Oh, well. That just tells you everything about the social pressure cooker she was operating in as a female artist.
Right. So it wasn't just about the art itself. It was navigating this really tricky social path. But what about their personal connection? The sources hint. Well, they don't confirm anything physical, but they suggest that from his paintings of her, quote, you can see the flirting taking place, especially in how he painted her eyes. That connection, it felt undeniable, almost like you could see it in the brushstrokes.
Exactly. And that's where the personal and artistic just merge, isn't it? But look, it wasn't just a one-way street, him painting his muse. Artistically, it was a real exchange. Berthe definitely adopted some of Édouard's style right after meeting him. You see her brushwork get bolder, more impressionistic. But, and this often gets missed, she influenced him too. Berthe was actually the one who encouraged Édouard to try painting en plein air, outdoors, capturing natural light, natural colors. For Édouard, who mostly worked in a studio, this was a pretty big shift.
Wow, that's a huge point. So she literally pulled him out of the studio into the light.
Pretty much. It was a genuine back and forth. Édouard himself said something like, "There are no lines in nature, only areas of color, one against another." They were real artistic catalysts for each other. They wrote warm letters, affectionate notes. He even gave her an easel one Christmas. It was an ongoing artistic conversation.
And that intense relationship, it has this really dramatic endpoint, visually speaking. After Berthe married Édouard's brother, Eugène, Édouard painted her one last time. And in this final portrait, her gold wedding ring is very noticeable. Prominent is the word used. And her eyes, they say, have lost their flirtiness and mystery as in some previous paintings. It feels like such a clear visual statement, doesn't it? Like closing a chapter.
Absolutely. It's a powerful piece of visual storytelling. That subtle change in her look, the focus on the ring, it signals a new reality, a new identity for Berthe. And maybe from Édouard's side, a kind of bittersweet acknowledgement of the new boundaries.
Okay, so moving into that new chapter. It was probably Édouard who introduced Berthe to his younger brother, Eugène. She knew both the Manet brothers. And it was Eugène who Berthe eventually married. They married in 1874. And for the time, they were both a bit older for a first marriage. Eugène was 41, Berthe 33. Now, some historians have wondered if it was maybe a marriage of convenience, for social reasons, stability. But the sources we looked at, they really paint a picture of a deeply loving and crucially supportive relationship.
Yes, what really comes through is Eugene's incredible dedication to her career. He seems to have consciously chosen to prioritize Berthe's art over any ambitions he might have had. He spent, quote, a lot of his time helping his wife with her artistic career. He'd go with her on art trips. He even sort of dabbled in art himself, but always in her shadow, it seems. Makes you ask that question again. Can supporting someone else's creative vision be an artistic act in itself? Eugene's life suggests maybe it can. He was like her manager, her roadie, her biggest fan, all rolled into one.
That's such an interesting way to put it. He channeled his own artistic side into enabling hers. And Berthe was apparently very clear. Marriage would not change her art. She kept painting prolifically. And she was fortunate, wasn't she? Her marriage meant she didn't have the financial pressure, didn't have to sell constantly to survive. There's even this charming little story from their honeymoon. They were in Cowes on the Isle of Wight, and Berthe convinced Eugene to pose for her. She wrote to her sister Edma about it, kind of teasingly. She said, "Poor Eugene is taking your place, but he is a much less accommodating model. He's quickly had enough."
Yeah, right. Even the most devoted husband can only sit still for so long. But that little snapshot, it just highlights the warmth, the everyday reality of their partnership.
It really does. And that feeling is backed up by Berthe's own words about marrying Eugene. She wrote, "I have found an honest and excellent man who I believe sincerely loves me. I have entered into the positive life after having lived for a long time in by chimeras." That phrase, positive life, compared to living in chimeras or illusions. It sounds like she really found something solid, something real with Eugene, maybe contrasting it implicitly with whatever intense but ultimately impossible connection she had with Édouard, who was married.
Exactly. It sounds like a grounded, fulfilling reality. And this positive, stable relationship, it had results beyond their own happiness. They had a daughter, Julie Manet, and she carried on the artistic legacy, became a painter, an art collector, a writer herself. Her diary, growing up with the Impressionists, it's famous now. Gives this amazing first-hand look into a home constantly filled with giants like Renoir, Degas, Monet, Sisley. It's kind of poignant, though. The sources note that despite all this, despite her talent and contributions, Berthe did not see much success during her lifetime. It just underscores the immense challenges women artists faced, even with support at home.
So putting the relationships aside for a moment, who was Berthe Morisot, the artist? I mean, fundamentally a key French painter, right?
Yeah.
A central figure in the Impressionist movement, celebrated for her delicate brushwork and light color palette.
Absolutely. And what's so compelling about Morisot is how she really carved her own path. She was one of the few women in the predominantly male Impressionist circle. That's crucial. And because of that, partly, she brought this distinctly feminine perspective to her art, our focus. It was often on domestic life and portraits, with a real emphasis on the lives and experiences of women, mothers, children, women at their toilet, reading, intimate scenes. This was a really interesting contrast to the cafes, the boulevards, the landscapes often favored by the men. It wasn't just what she painted, it was how. It was a profound thematic statement. And her technique, that loose brushwork, the play of light and shadow, it was innovative, distinctive. You know a Morisot when you see one.
And it wasn't easy for her, was it? The sources make that clear. She faced big challenges just being a woman artist then. Things like limited access to formal art education, barriers to getting into public exhibitions. And her work was often marginalized or not taken as seriously as that of her male peers.
Yeah.
But she pushed through, didn't she? Built a career, exhibited with the Impressionists multiple times.
She really did persevere. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, her influence goes way beyond her own lifetime. Her work has had this lasting impact on modern art, especially in how we view female artists and how women's lives are represented in art. By focusing on those everyday, often private moments, she kind of opened the door for future generations of artists to explore similar themes and have them taken seriously. She wasn't just part of Impressionism. She actively contributed to its development, brought this vital, often overlooked perspective. You just have to think of works like The Cradle from 72 or Summer's Day from 79, Woman at Her Toilet, reading. They're landmark paintings.
So what's the big takeaway then from this whole tangled story? We've walked through this really captivating narrative, haven't we? Intertwined lives, artistic fire, social pressures, enduring love. From Édouard Manet, the rebel with a mysterious past, to Berthe Morisot, his muse, but also this groundbreaking artist herself. And then finally, her marriage to Eugène Manet, which seems so deeply supportive and loving, it really makes you rethink where artistic inspiration and support come from, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. I think this deep dive really shows that while those artistic sparks with Édouard were undeniable, maybe even, electrifying, it was actually in her positive life with Eugène, that stability, that unwavering support, that Berthe Morisot found the foundation to truly flourish, both as a woman and as an artist. And that shaped her unique, lasting contribution to Impressionism. Her journey kind of highlights that maybe sometimes the greatest artistic freedom doesn't come from the grand dramatic gestures, the big romantic mysteries. Maybe it comes from that steady, everyday support, the kind that creates a safe harbor for creativity.
And that really leaves us with something compelling for you, our listener, to think about. In a world that's often drawn to the drama of love triangles, the allure of forbidden passion, Berthe Morisot's own words suggest that her truest, most powerful partnership wasn't the one wrapped in all that mystery with Édouard. It was the one built on, as she put it, an honest and excellent man who, I believe, sincerely loves me. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of relationship truly empowers us, frees us up to do our best work? Something to maybe mull over until our next deep dive.